You've just moved to one of the most violent places in the country, a land where the sun doesn't rise for months, driving feels like a death trap, and the mosquitoes aren't just aggressive, they're massive. Sounds like a dystopian nightmare, right? But this place isn't on the other side of the world, it's right here in the US. Welcome to Alaska. But hey, at least the salmon's good. Get ready to discover the real story in this episode of the Infographic Show. The truth about living in Alaska no one talks about. Known as the last frontier, Alaska is a unique place to live for countless reasons. It was the second to last state to join the Union, and it is nowhere near the rest of them. Perched on the northwestern edge of Canada, Alaska is actually closer to Siberia than it is to most of the United States. It is the largest exclave in the world, and unlike the other U.S. remote states, it is not seen as a little slice of paradise. It is a massive, foreboding landscape in the Great White North. Did we mention it was massive? Because seriously, Alaska is really big. Not only is Alaska the largest U.S. state by area, none of the others even come close. Alaska contains more total area than the next three largest states of Texas, California, and Montana combined. At over 665,000 square miles, it would be the 40th largest country in the world if it was independent. This massive area is heavily taken up by a natural landscape that contains 8 national parks, including Denali National Park, containing one of the most impressive mountain ranges in the United States. A large portion of the state is largely the province of the wilderness, including wildlife like bears, moose, wolves, and caribou. But there is something that it does not have much of: people. Despite its massive size, Alaska is the least densely populated state in the U.S., with around 740,000 people as of 2024. It ranks third lowest in total population, but it is 7 times larger than Wyoming, the actual least populated state. That has led to a unique reputation for those who live in Alaska. Are the residents of the last frontier really all hardy mountain men chasing isolation and living off the land with zero interest in human contact? Is Alaska just one giant lumberjack convention? Well, the answer is no, probably. Alaska's full of rough and tumble outdoorsmen who love the harsh climate and the relative isolation, but you probably won't be seeing too many of them. Despite most of the state being largely unspoiled wilderness, the vast majority of the state lives in cities. In fact, nearly half of Alaska's population, just under 300,000 people, live in the city of Anchorage, near the state's southern border. It can easily be reached from British Columbia, and it seems like a thriving modern city. You'll find a rich dining and cultural scene, plenty of shopping, and lots of families. If you're moving there, life will be pretty normal. But outside of that, life in Alaska provides one surprise after another. The city of Fairbanks, the largest city in the interior region of Alaska, is the state's second largest, but that just puts it at a little over 10% of Anchorage's population, with just over 31,000 residents. A former trading post and key location in the Alaskan gold rush, the city has grown a lot and has a university in its city limits, as well as being the smallest city in the United States with an international airport. But the cold temperatures and remote location mean it's a difficult place to get to, and it gets relatively little tourism. But that is nothing compared to what it's like to get to the state's capital. Juneau might be the most famous city in Alaska, along with its seat of government, but it is also one of the most remote major cities in the United States. Located along the Alaskan Panhandle, it also has a population of around 31,000 as of 2024. Located on a key fishing location for local native tribes, Juneau is unique for being one of the only 2 state capitals not connected to the rest of the state by roads. The only other is Honolulu, and that's on an island. The city's surrounded by rugged terrain, so anything and anyone coming in has to be transported by plane. But Juneau's stunning views make it a popular tourist location in Alaska. Most new arrivals wind up living in one of those 3 cities, because outside of it, things become really strange. No other city in Alaska tops 10,000 residents. Even Wasilla, the 5th largest and home to Sarah Palin, is right next to Anchorage, making it part of the state's sprawling metropolitan area. Outside of that, most cities in Alaska are tightly knit small communities of only a few thousand people, many of which are highly isolated from the rest of the state and heavily reliant on local meat and imported goods. And in many of them, you'll encounter some truly strange conditions. With just under 5,000 people, the city of Utqiagvik, the northernmost city in the United States, is one of the coldest places that anyone lives in the country. The majority of the streets in this town are unpaved because the permafrost in the ground makes milling and paving highly difficult. The temperature in the town is above the freezing point only for an average of 136 days per year. Snowfall can happen throughout the year, and the town's polar night can last 60 days when the sun doesn't rise. Formerly known as Barrow, the town gained worldwide fame when it was the star of a horror series named 30 Days of Night, in which vampires came to the town during the lengthy dark period. And for people who live in challenging isolated conditions, they can find unusual ways to adapt. Whittier is a small town located on the southern coast of Alaska with a population of only 252 people at the last count. Formerly a military harbor and logistics base, the town is located in an extremely wet climate, receiving an estimated 197 inches of rain per year. It's about 80 minutes from Anchorage by car, but in an isolated coastal location. But the good news is, the residents don't have to go far for work, dining, recreation, or home, because they almost all live under one roof. In addition to all the apartments, the Baggage Towers complex contains a church, a school, a post office, a general store, and a laundromat, plus conference space and short-term rental apartments. It is essentially a city under one roof. So what makes Alaska such a strange place, and how did it become like this? Alaska's harsh climate and isolation made it one of the last regions in North America to be colonized. Scientists believe early Native Americans migrated from Siberia across the Bering Land Bridge, settling in the region thousands of years ago. Tribes like the Tlingit, the Haida, and the Tsimshian were prominent in the area. They carved out simple lifestyles based around fishing and harvesting, and they used traditional techniques to build houses and design clothing that would allow them to survive Alaska's brutal winters. And then eventually the rest of the world made its way in. In the 1700s, Russia became the first major power to stake a claim, establishing fur trading posts. Spain made some attempts too, but the land's remoteness kept both from gaining full control. Then in 1867, the United States bought Alaska from Russia for $7.2 million, a deal often mocked at the time as Seward's folly. Native populations who vastly outnumbered settlers were never consulted. For years, governance was minimal, but everything changed with the gold rush of the late 1800s, which brought settlers, boom towns, and economic interest. Juneau became the capital, and industries like fishing, logging, and oil followed. During World War II, Alaska's strategic military value accelerated development, laying the groundwork for statehood in 1959. Today, Alaska has the highest percentage of Native American residents of any U.S. state. Many indigenous communities continue to practice traditional survival skills, especially in remote towns like Utqiagvik, where over 60% of residents are indigenous. But even with deep cultural roots and a growing population, life in Alaska today comes with some serious challenges. For one thing, what will you do for a living? Employment in Alaska is a tricky beast to manage. There are jobs in the major cities, of course. You might be able to get a job in any sort of service position in Anchorage that you would anywhere else. There are always kitchen positions, retail, and customer service opportunities, but few of those pay very well. Government and professional positions do exist, but they're highly competitive due to the smaller population and limited number of corporations based there. And there's another unwelcome surprise waiting for new arrivals. Despite being remote, Alaska is actually one of the more expensive states to live in. The average cost of living is around $54,000 a year, and this is well above the national average. This is mostly due to the limited real estate and the difficulty of getting goods into the area. There's a significant markup due to transit costs on many common goods in the supermarket or department store, and the supply is heavily dependent on the weather in many areas. That means anyone who wants to live here should tighten up their budget, or they should prepare for a tough job, or maybe a grand adventure. There are well-paying jobs in Alaska, but few of them are easy 9-to-5ers. These are the kind of jobs that are less of a profession and more of a lifestyle. And many of Alaska's new residents show up with a job already in hand. Alaska's home to some of the U.S.'s best oil and gas fields, and mining is a key industry. For those who prefer to stick close to the coast, Alaska's fishing industry is thriving, especially during salmon season, so those who don't get seasick will be able to find a position reeling in the day's catch. Of course, one profession offers more jobs than most, but it may be the biggest challenge. One of the most important professions in Alaska is simply bringing goods to other people, particularly those in the far-flung towns and cities. This job requires long-haul truckers, as this is the most reliable way to deliver large hauls anywhere with a road. The long-haul trucker business is active throughout the country, but doing it in Alaska is very different. You are far more likely to encounter long stretches without a single person or community anywhere in sight. So those who are willing to take the plunge should be comfortable with keeping themselves company, and they should also be ready for danger. There are plenty of risky roads in Alaska, especially during the winter. You'll encounter snow and ice, and many of them are highly isolated, so a breakdown can be a major danger. But nothing intimidates drivers quite like the Dalton Highway. Clocking in at 414 miles, it was opened back in 1974 to serve as a route to the North Slope oil extraction site. Paralleling a key pipeline, it's one of the most isolated roads in the whole country, with only 3 towns along the route, none of them with more than 50 permanent residents. The endpoint, Dead Horse, has several thousand temporary residents during oil production season, and that means every journey can be a test of fate. The Dalton Highway begins around 80 miles northwest of Fairbanks, and from there, you might not see another person for hundreds of miles. The route is beautiful in places with wide mountain views, but it can also be treacherous. Thanks to the harsh climate, much of the highway is unpaved, rough, and gravel-packed. It's open year-round, and oddly enough, more trucks travel it in winter than summer. And that's when things get brutal. From late September to early May, temperatures regularly drop to negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit before wind chill. Fuel is only available at the small town of Coldfoot and at the far end in Dead Horse, just like medical facilities which exist only at those 2 distant points. The state safety authorities highly recommend against any small vehicle or motorcycle traffic on the road, leaving this journey to the truckers. And despite the danger, many take it. The road carries a significant amount of truck traffic during the busy months, with around 160 trucks daily in the summer and 250 in the winter. Truck drivers are required to keep their headlights on at all times, but there is always the chance of something going wrong. If someone finds themselves stranded out on the Dalton Highway, their only real chance of help is to wait for another truck to pass by, flag them down, and hope they have what you need. While the vast majority of people who take the road are truckers, there is some tourism in the area, as private companies will ferry people to the Arctic Sea for some extremely rare sights. And that is where Alaska's other main industry comes into play. What is the best thing to do if you're coming to Alaska? Serving people who are also coming to Alaska. The Last Frontier has developed a thriving tourist scene, and its main attraction is Alaska itself. Due to the harsh conditions of the region, Alaska doesn't have many of the key attractions that would bring people there, like amusement parks. While most of its cities do have cultural sites, the lion's share of people who come to the state for tourism want to see the most beautiful spots Alaska has to offer. And much of Alaska has been transformed into a celebration of its natural wonders. The vast majority of people who come to Alaska are there to see some of its national parks, and the good news is they're spread across Alaska and offer a vast diversity of landscapes and features. The bad news is, well, they're spread across Alaska and they take a lot of time and planning to get to. Anyone who's planning to see them all should probably plan an extended stay, and likely not just one trip. Only a select group of people have seen all 8, and they need to use a combination of planes, trains, and automobiles to explore them all. And they frequently found themselves in shockingly remote landscapes, and that might be an area where many visitors seek employment. Tourism is a huge business for Alaska, but those who want to work in the national parks might just find themselves far away from civilization. These parks have on-site positions for those who want to work as rangers, tour guides, or rescue workers, for those who want to come to the parks. But while some parks like Denali or Glacier Bay might be thriving tourist sites with hotels on-site, others like Gates of the Arctic are extremely remote and only accessible by air taxi, which means that those who staff those far-flung parks may find themselves spending a lot of time with their own thoughts. And that isolation can lead to some big challenges. Sure, Alaska may be known for its stunning wilderness and impressive landscapes, but it's also high on the charts for violent crime per capita. That means that you're more likely to be assaulted, robbed, or even killed here than anywhere else in the United States. In 2024, Alaska reported almost 760 violent crimes per 100,000 residents. Just over 1 year earlier, in 2023, those numbers were even worse. There were just under 2,000 violent crimes per 100,000 people, nearly 5.4 times the national average. Aggravated assaults alone were just under 1,800 per 100,000, around 6.7 times the national average. Robberies and homicides also far higher than the US average. So, are Alaskans just angry, or is there something else behind this crime spree? Well, isolation is a huge factor. Many Alaskan communities are cut off from the rest of the world, reachable by only bush plane, boat, or snowmobile. When violence breaks out, help might be hours or days away. But it runs deeper than geography. Alaska has some of the highest rates of domestic violence in the country, especially among Native and Indigenous women. It's estimated that 6 in 10 women in Alaska will face domestic abuse or the threat of violence in their lifetimes. Add in alcohol abuse, poverty, and an ever-growing mental health crisis, and the picture gets even darker. Some communities don't have law enforcement at all. And it's not just in the rural towns, the problem is in the major cities. Anchorage, Fairbanks, and other urban centers face gang violence, aggravated assaults, and homicide rates well above the national average. And as if violence and isolation weren't enough, Alaska's brutal winters bring their own set of challenges. In most areas of Alaska, days during the winter are very short and nights are long, bitter, and cold. In Anchorage and Juneau, winter days can be as short as 5 or 6 hours during the peak of the winter. This means that people will leave for work in the darkness and come home in the darkness. Even in Anchorage, the most temperate part of the state, average winter temperatures range from 5 to 30 degrees Fahrenheit, which means most people aren't spending much time outdoors. This can cause seasonal affective disorder, as many people find the winter in Alaska challenging to get through. And while the winter baseline may be challenging, that is nothing compared to how bad it can get. Weather in Alaska is extremely unpredictable, and snow is common in the winter. If the winds shift slightly, it can bring in heavy snow, and with large portions of Alaska under deep freeze year-round, this means the snow sticks around. Extended snowfalls can bury whole towns, making roads impassable for extended periods. For long-haul drivers, this can mean massive delays that impact their finances, and for people in those areas, it can mean extended periods stuck in the home. I hope you stocked up on soup and beans. And the larger a place is, the more perilous it can be to keep everyone connected. Alaska is a modern place, and even the most remote location typically has power, cell service, and internet access. But that connection to the outside world might be more perilous than it is in other locations. After all, we know that power or internet can go out pretty quickly when a rough storm hits, and then it's a game of frantically staring at the router until the lights turn green again. But when the connection is located 100 miles away from the nearest town, it might all hinge on the skill of the local repairman, or waiting for someone from the cable company to make their way down the long, lonely highway. And while there are certainly some beautiful places to live in Alaska, they don't come cheap. Housing is often limited, groceries are pricier than the US on average, and utilities can hit especially hard. The reason is the same as with everything else. Fuel has to be imported to keep homes warm through the long, brutal winters. Add in the cost of paying the truckers and the pilots who deliver the goods across this massive, rugged state, and you will feel it in your wallet the moment you arrive. But at least the food is good, right? The eats are one of the biggest things that people talk about when considering a trip to Alaska, to visit or to stay. A pair of salmon bakes are the top attractions in Juneau and Fairbanks, offering a taste of Alaska's bounty of the sea. And the national parks and waterfronts are a top destination for sport fishers looking to reel in some delicious catch. There's also usually a plentiful supply of wild game. But when it comes to imports, things get trickier. Alaska doesn't have the farmland that you'll find in the continental US, which means standard issue meats are usually more expensive. And as for fresh produce, it's limited at best. Only a few hardy crops like potatoes, carrots, and kale are grown in the state. And when it comes to fruit, fresh blueberries are one of the state's iconic treats, but as for the rest of your favorites, they have to be imported. And you can expect to pay a premium. And the same goes for housing. On average, getting a place to live in Alaska will be more challenging than it is in most other locations. This is because large swaths of the state are still heavily underdeveloped. And what's more, many of them never will be. The majority of the land in Alaska is owned by the federal government, and it is under protection, which means you certainly can't build a town on top of it. In the cities, most people will live in apartment buildings, which tend to be densely packed. The lack of housing in the state means that many people wind up living in overcrowded cabins or trailers in rural areas, and the housing crunch can be seen in the vacancy rate. At 4.6%, it's one of the lowest in the country. Thinking of buying? The average home price statewide is around $375,000. In Anchorage, that jumps to $425,000, a 6.3% increase from the previous year. Space is limited, demand is high, and prices are only going up. Of course, many visitors might be shocked by one thing when they arrive, and it is not a pleasant surprise. For most people, their impression of Alaska is a vast frozen wilderness covered with snow and wandering moose. But for much of the year, coastal Alaska is a beautiful place covered with greenery and lush fishing spots. And that brings another challenge that takes many people by surprise: mosquitoes. Lots of them. Every year, an estimated 17 trillion of those little bloodsuckers hatch across the state. And these aren't your average backyard pests. Alaskan mosquitoes are massive. Locals often wear nets and full-body coverings just to go outside, because dozens of those large mosquitoes can swarm a person's arms, legs, or even face for a buffet. And that's far from the only resident of nature you're going to come across. Those who want to live in Alaska, especially if they don't want to live in one of the largest cities, had better be comfortable with encountering some mighty beasts. Similar to Canada, moose are a common sight in Alaska, and those beasts are huge. Often called the last remnant of North American megafauna, these antlered creatures are very capable of totaling a car in a head-on collision. And then, of course, there are the bears. Brown, black, and grizzly. Bears are incredibly prevalent in Alaska, and they want to get their paws on the same salmon the fishermen do. Frozen landscapes, remote cities, monster mosquitoes. So what's driving people to move to Alaska? Well, for one thing, the local government really wants people to come. And that's why they're offering some big subsidies to lure people to move in. For those who stay for more than a year and intend to stay permanently, they're eligible for a subsidy known as the Permanent Fund Dividend, which distributes a portion of the state's oil and gas money among the people. The state also has the lowest tax burden of any state in the United States, including having no personal income tax and no overall state sales tax. And if you're really tired of the rat race, well, this might just be the place for you. If you truly want to get off the grid, this is one of the few places in the country where it is possible to just camp out in your own little homestead for an extended period. Alaska is far less heavily developed than in other states, so if you feel that it's time to establish the United States of Bob, well, no one's stopping you from calling it that. Although it's not possible to claim land via homesteading anymore, it can be arranged with local municipalities. But if you are not an intense outdoors lover, you can just keep this little slice of land as your vacation spot while holding down the fort in the city. Just make sure that you're not on protected land when you do so. And if you like your privacy, the odds are your new vacation home will still be very quiet. After all, Alaska is really big, and the last frontier might just be the perfect spot for some seclusion. Except for all those mosquitoes. Want to know more about some unexpected things you might see in the skies over Alaska? Check out Alaska's most terrifying UFO encounters, or watch Most Dangerous Places on Earth for a look at the locales that make even the hardiest Alaskans head straight for the Dalton Highway.